Divas. Today I'm going to do our third card for our March series class, which is using the Regarding Dahlias stamp set. It has this nice, usually if it's a big item like this, I usually get it in wood, but it has a beautiful dahlia, then it has some sayings that go with it. This is layered with dimensional so that it's 3D. And it has some of the discontinued clearance item fabric on it. And this one's done with strawberry slush and old olive. But the one I'm going to do today, I'm going to do with tangerine tango and gumball green. It's a little bit of brighter color for spring. It's on a whisper white card base with a layer of green and a layer of white that's embossed with the elegant Eastern Elegance embossing folder. And then a piece of Designer Series paper pack from the In Color stack, the fabric, and then using the Artisan Punch and Label Love, we made the little sentiment. But what I want to show you right now is just the embossing. A lot of people say embossing is so difficult. It doesn't have to be. So I want to show you the way that I do it, especially for a big stamp like this. So we're going to put the card aside, and what I have, I've gone ahead and cut my paper for my flower, because I don't need to stamp a whole flower just to get that little bit in the middle. This is enough, but I'm going to stamp 2 complete images for the other 2 layers. I've just done 3 layers. You could do 4. You could do as many as you want to stamp and cut out, because it's all fussy cut and you may not want to do that much fussy cutting. But I'm going to just show you quickly how I do my embossing. Now you can use white embossing powder, but I always just use the plain Versamark. That way I can tell, you know, how clean the pad is, because sometimes these pads, because they're glue, they get all sticky and fuzz gets on them and stuff. So I'm just going to stamp that up really good with the sticky Versamark. I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to lay it on the stamp. And I'm going to rub it around to the edges. Since it's going to be cut out, it doesn't matter if you go outside the lines with this edges of the rubber stamp. If you'll just hold your finger there like that, then you can pick the thing up without smudging it. And I'm going to just lay that in my bucket of embossing powder. This is Stampin' Up! White embossing powder. And I'm just going to do like that and just slide the paper in there so that you get a nice clear image. I'm going to lay that in a metal pan. I use a metal pan because I think it heats faster and quicker. And make sure you ink your stamp again. Every time you stamp off with the Versamark, you have to ink again. I'm going to lay my paper on the stamp. Get some good coverage there. Pick it up. Put it in my, this is just the sandwich size of Ziploc brand container. I keep all my embossing powders in those. And just label them with what color they are. You can keep a spoon in there. Some people like to do that and put it on, but when I've already got my paper cut, I can just do like that. Lay it over in my metal pan. Now I just need a little bit for the center. I don't have to ink the whole stamp up. And then I'm just going to lay it where I want. I just want that little part in the middle, so I'm just going to lay that there. Put that in the powder. And there's my little part for the middle. Lay that aside. And make sure you move your powder and your Versamark away from this heating, because it dries out the pad and it'll melt the embossing powder. Don't try to cram up your desktop with all that. So you turn I'm using the heat gun. Mine's not a Stampin' Up! Heat gun because I had mine before I was a demonstrator. But go ahead and I let it get run for just a few seconds there to start getting hot. And I got this on a metal pan. It makes it go a lot faster, I guess, because it heats from both sides when it's on metal. And I'm just going to, I'll just use this little paintbrush to hold that corner so it won't burn my finger. And just start melting the embossing powder. And of course you know that embossing powder looks grainy, and then when you start heating it, it actually melts and gets really, really shiny. So you want to do it at an angle to the light where you can see that all the surface is melted. And it's just as important not to touch the design after the melting as it is before, because is still wet, and if you touch that, it'll smear. So I'm going to take that and lay it aside because I don't want my paper flying around and touching each other. I'm going to do this one. And you can just hold it. Don't get it so close to your paper that you burn it. You don't want it to burn. And the hotter the tool gets here, it starts melting a lot quicker. A lot of people let their gun heat up for like, 30 seconds or so before they even start using it. And then the little piece. Okay. And that looks good. That's all melted. And now I'm going to let it cool down. And once it gets cool, then we're going to fussy cut it. All 3 pieces. So we'll just lay that aside and let that cool. And then we'll trim it out. I have finished fussy cutting the dahlia. And these are the 3 pieces. I picked the one that had the best edges for my base piece. This is the next layer. And this will be the center. These will all be put on top of each other with dimensionals. And if you want to see how I cut that, you can study that to see which leaves I kept. And that'll go on top of here. And I try to match up, where it came from, but it'll be with dimensionals. And then that piece will be there. So those are my 3 pieces fussy cut. See this center one, that's the one that everybody says, well, how much did you cut off? Well, that's how much I cut off. You can see like one round really at the outside leaves. So we'll put that aside. I've stamped 3 leaves with gumball green with the French foliage set. You could use falling leaf set. Any of the leaves will work. These aren't the kind of leaves that would be on a dahlia, but they're good enough for a card project. And I've stamped them with a little bit of mustard and then the gumball green, but now I'm going to take my dauber and gumball green and just highlight those edges so there's not so much white showing since the card is white. A little more color. So there are my 3 leaves. And when I'm doing a project, I keep my daubers in an empty accessory cup. And those are the colors we used on this, which is the orange and the gumball green. And on the tangerine, on the flower, I used my marker. And I actually used the brush tip and lightly did some shadowing on each one of these leaves that's going to show. You don't have to do the center because it's going to be covered up. But just like that. And then once you do that, you're going to... Some of your white's going to have ink on it. I just rub it with my finger and then wipe it off with a paper towel. So you can do that for shading. You don't have to add that step if you don't want to. We've stamped the Label Love stamp and the thank you from the My Digital Studio thank you set. And I'm just going to punch that with the Artisan Label Punch. And then I'm going to punch a piece of gumball green. And take the gumball green piece and just cut it in half. And this is going to be our mat for this piece. I'll once again just use the Stampin' Up! Glue pen. And put a little there on each end. And lay it on there like that. Just a little bit of a mat. Just like so. And that will go on with dimensionals. And I'll probably put 4 on there just to make sure it stays on the card. Because this would be a card that would go in the mail. So you want to make sure it stays assembled till it gets to its destination. Okay, so there's our sentiment. There's our flower ready. Our leaves ready. And I have 2 embellishments for the front. And they are the Gumball Green Designer Series in color paper stack piece, the one that has the stripes on the back. This is a piece of fabric from the discontinued Stampin' Up! 4 sets of fabric that they had. This is the one that had the tangerine in it. I believe it's the one from Thanksgiving that had like the spice or something, so it has that orangey color. And I've already fishtail cut the ends. I've cut a piece of Whisper White, and this is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8, and I've embossed it with the Baroque embossing folder. I'm going to consider this my front side. So I want to put these two pieces on and let them wrap over the top of the white. And I'm going to put the green on top of the, overlap the orange just a little bit. Let the orange come down, or the tangerine come down about that far, and the green about that far, just like that. I'll pick them up together and just fold it over. Put snail just to hold it. And then because this paper is embossed, you're going to want to use sticky strip or score pile tape to adhere this to your next mat. So that's what we're going to use. I've got some score pile tape here. That's easier to use than sticky strip when you're making a video, because you don't want to have to stop and get your scissors every time to cut the sticky strip. So we'll just put that there. And that there. And there. And one more down the other side. Okay, I'm going to put some underneath these two pieces of embellishment, just to kind of, some snail there just to hold that down, since our flower is going to be mounted to that. Okay, now this is ready to be mounted to our next piece, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 of gumball green cardstock. You can use old olive for this, but I haven't ordered any old olive since Christmas, and that's one of the colors that kind of fades if you don't use it up right away. So I didn't like the way my stash of that looked, so I'm using the gumball green because it's brighter. And just mount that straight as you can. Okay, and there's nothing else to go, what I say, under here or be wrapped around. So this can be mounted to your card front, and this is just a regular A4 card out of Whisper White. And I'm just going to fold it. Since it's Whisper White, it's very easy to fold without using your score tool. And this can be put on with, you can use more score pile tape, or you can just use snail. That just goes out that to the front of your card. Okay, so now lay that aside, and we got our leaves ready, our sentiment, and our flower. So we're just going to put the flower together with some dimensionals. And you don't want to put so many that it shows a lot, but you want to get enough on there so that it stays, you know, where you put it. I'm going to put 3 on this piece. Okay, and let's see if we can line that up. Goes just like that. And then put 2 on this centerpiece. Here. Maybe a half of one. Just use a half. You can use every little piece of your dimensional pack there. Cut up the edges. I use all the little strips. Just cut all that and use it. No reason to waste any of it. You might even have something that shape that you need just that little bitty sticking out part for. Okay. Put the center on. And it goes like that. Let's see, like this. So make sure dahlia look like it's pointing up, because we cut away this part and left this, so it gives it the illusion that it's not straight on, but it's pointing up from here. We'll go ahead and mount that to the card. And I'll turn it around so you can see how it's mounted. I'm going to do it about this angle right here. And then I'm just going to put a dimensional on the back of each leaf and just poke them in to underneath the flower. There's a couple of cards out there on Pinterest made just like this, different colors. You can even, instead of embossing this piece, you could actually just stamp it with jet black or StazOn onto some designer series paper, like something from maybe an in-color pack, and cut that out. Most any of them are pretty just fussy cut because it's just such a pretty flower. And there's if you just go on Pinterest, you can just type in Stampin' Up regarding dahlias, and you'll see several cards made similar to this. Okay, so there's my leaves. And now I'm going to put my sentiment on, and I don't want to cover up this piece of fabric because I think that's kind of one of the focal points, is the card with fabric on it. So I'll put the sentiment down here on this side, like right about there. I'll just use thank you. You could use anything in there. The happy birthday from a lot of the sets fits in this little hole. I just used my Digital Studio sentiment there. Okay, so that's the card. You could put a piece of gumball inside with another piece of white to kind of offset this, because when you stand this card up, it's going to have a tendency to want to fall over because it's whisper white and the cardstock's not quite as heavy. So there it is in the orange or tangerine tango, and here it is in the strawberry slush. And the measurements, again, are a regular card base. The first mat, the green mat, is 5 3/8 by 4. Your white piece is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And once, of course, it's embossed, it's a little bit smaller. That's why it has a better margin once you cut it and then emboss it. The pieces of fabric and the other fishtail piece are 1 1/4 inches wide. And then you have your artisan label punch piece, and you'll need your coordinating pen. You'll need some daubers if you want to sponge around your leaves. The leaves are from Foliage, and they are done in gumball green. Happy stamping!